Hi, in this presentation, we're going to discuss the conclusion application section for the athletic training research paper. So obviously, as I just said, my objectives for this presentation, we'll review the research process again and discuss specifically what to include in our conclusion application section. I'm also going to provide examples from previous research papers for you to see. As I've gone over in previous presentations, let's go over our research process that we've been going through in our class. Um, we've You've been doing a literature review. Um, Obviously, I had you write your research questions and hypothesis first, and then do your literature review. It's not the typical way that we would do it. Um, we would have a topic, start doing literature review, then come up with a research question, purpose statement, and hypothesis, then develop your research methods. Then you would actually do this study, collect your data, analyze the data, interpret the data, report the data, which is draw conclusions and findings. Um, we've been through that process. We haven't collected any data. We haven't analyzed any data in this particular paper that you're writing, but that's what you would do if you were actually doing a study. You write the results sections, what was found. You're not required to do that for this paper. That would be the statistics that you would see in most research articles that you are reading. Then we're in the last two sections here, the discussion. So what's it mean? So what? What do the findings mean? What's it all about? After we've looked at the statistics, drawn our conclusions, what's it mean? And then our last section is application. How can I use this information? So we'll talk about the last two sections for your paper for our class. So for our assignment, the conclusion application section, it is, in my opinion, the most difficult section to write. I'm not the best writer in the world. I really struggle with writing. I know when I read papers for classes, I know what good writing is and what poor writing is. I can help a little bit on the writing, but it's still a bit of a challenge for me when I do my own writing for different things here on campus. If it's more important, I'll have my wife read it and help me with it because she's a better writer than me when I'm working with stuff that goes to journals or stuff like that. Uh, Learn to collaborate with others who are better authors than me, better writers, and I can put down my information and they can make it sound a lot better than I can ever write. So if you are writing challenged like me, I would recommend having somebody help you with writing both the introduction and your conclusion application sections. I've provided you a couple documents that were written by former editors of the Journal of Athletic Trainers on tips on writing in general that might be helpful for you. One of the other reasons why this is more difficult to write these particular sections is that in the previous sections we are looking at previous research that's been done and just basically reporting what's been done. Now you are drawing conclusions, you are discussing the possible outcomes or theory, or you are using your creativity and your logic to discuss what the findings mean and how it can be applied. So that can be a bit of a challenge for some people. One thing that I'd also recommend doing is reading the conclusion discussion sections of other journal articles. See how other authors who are published, how they craft these sections and model what you're going to write after them. Now, just don't copy and paste what they wrote, but you can use the way they have crafted their paragraphs, their sentences, in these sections. That's what I like to do. Is I like to read to other authors, and they help me understand a way to communicate the information that I'm trying to write about. So for our paper, for our assignment, you will have the following 4 sections. You'll have a conclusion section, which is 1 to 2 paragraphs, discussion section 2 to 3 paragraphs, recommendations 3 to 4 paragraphs, and application 3 to 5 paragraphs. Now I'm going to go over each one of these sections, talk about what to include in each section, and then provide you an example for each section. So in the conclusion section, I said it's 1 to 2 paragraphs. Since we're not actually doing a study and you're not going to write the results section, and the results section would include the number of participants, the demographics of the participants, how many males, how many females, if it was an education study, how many of the participants were juniors and seniors, those type of things. What were the descriptive statistics, which are means and all standard deviations, those type of things, and then the statistical analysis section, which is the most important section, is when we're comparing one group to another group, or if we're looking for a relationship between variable X and variable Y. That's when we find out if there was actually some kind of difference in our experiment. If we did an experiment, if we're doing just a descriptive study, we would report the numbers. If we're doing a number type research, also known as quantitative or qualitative. Qualitative is the words. Those are like a lot of the observational studies. But we're not doing the results section, so you're going to have to make up the possible outcomes or results of your study. We're not going to use words. We're just going to use theory and do our best educated guess based on previous research. We asked a particular research question or a purpose statement, and then what do we think the outcome is going to be based on the previous research. And so let's look at an example here. The thing I like about this example is that the student, this is from a research paper for a class, is that they included the purpose statement for their research. So they started this section, the conclusion section, on reminding the reader what the purpose of the study was. So the purpose of the study was to determine if there was a relationship between regular training sessions using a neuromuscular proprioceptive training program and the occurrence of ACL injuries. So, and then the student went right into the main findings and discussed those. I'm not going to read that. You can read that on your own. You have the slides in front of you, but the student did not do this study. This was a made-up study also, but based on the previous research that he or she did through the journal article and their literature review, this is what they assumed would happen if they actually did this study, and that's what you will do too. You'll describe what you think will happen here using the appropriate scholarly language, as you'll see on these examples. Again, this is about a paragraph, maybe 2 paragraphs, depending on what your topic is and what your research will find, and what you think will find. But pretty straightforward, pretty concise. The next section is when you actually say what you think this means. This is the discussion section, and you want to explain what you guess the outcomes or the findings are from your paper, from your research, are linked to previous studies. So again, I'll provide you an example here. And again, you'll see this in the discussion section within the Journal of Athletic Training or the Athletic Training and Education journal, or most journal articles that you'll read. They'll link, compare, contrast how what they found was supported or not supported by previous research. And also, how do the findings, results fit into the theory, and how do they add to theory? Because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to build a theory of what we think if we do this particular treatment protocol, how's that going to add to the evidence that that particular treatment or modality or whatever we're looking at actually adds, that we should actually do this particular treatment for that particular injury. And so how does that add to that theory? This section is pretty substantial, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs. And so we have an example here. I'm not going to read it, but what I like about this is that first the student starts with what's consistent with what has been done in the previous research, and then I believe then 1 or 2 paragraphs of that what's consistent with what's happened previously, and then also the student had 1 or 2 paragraphs on what is inconsistent or does not support the previous research, and then what does that mean? That's where we're going to get to the next section, is a recommendation. And then our recommendation section, we want to provide recommendations for athletic trainers. How can other athletic trainers actually use this information? This is probably one of the sections that you probably want to read the most as you are reading research. Read the introduction, read the research question, and go to the results, or go to the recommendations. What do they recommend as athletic trainers based on the results of the study? Sorry, let me go back. This section is where you will get to use your creativity and your thought process as you've been thinking through this research for a while. Just put yourself in the as somebody else is reading this material. What are the takeaways that you have for other athletic trainers? This is going to be very similar to application, which is the last section. So how can I apply this information? This one is recommendation to others. The application section is how you can personally use it. Again, I have an example here. I'm not going to read it because you can read it right off the PowerPoint slide or the screen. But what I like about this particular, just the paragraph, it's longer than this obviously, is that it will provide the athletic trainer useful information on how they can use it in their practice, and cited previous research that supported their recommendations. That's another critical component of this section, is that you're still citing previous research to support your recommendations. And our last section here is application. How can you use this information? I really want you to think through how you can apply this information in your clinical setting, or and what you do as an athletic trainer, because you picked this topic for a reason. That's why in our first class together, why I asked you to pick a topic and give the reason why you wanted that topic, and we continue that in this course, why you selected that topic and why you've been thinking through this for a while now, why you picked this topic. So how can you use this information? In this section, you can use first person, or you can stay in third person, but not in second, either first or third person in this example. And this student here, what they wrote about, again, they're still citing references. They're still supporting what they're writing with references, which is critical because we want to be evidence-based academics, and along with evidence-based practitioners. So 3 to 5 paragraphs here, how you can apply the information. Be specific in your own workplace, how you can apply the information that you've learned. What are your own personal takeaways on what you've learned through this time, and thinking through this study, this pretend study that you've been doing for the last 8 weeks or so. Then the last thing for your paper is to have a summary section. It's 1 paragraph summary of the study as a whole, the paper as a whole. Summarize the the information for the reader in one paragraph. And that'll be your last section, other than your reference page, your if you have appendices for your paper. If you need help, again, with the writing, I would suggest that you just write your paper. Hopefully you have somebody who can help you write. We're talking about structure and grammar and those type of things that this section, along with the introduction section, should be able to be read by another athletic trainer. And have a good understanding of the material. Hopefully you can find somebody that is pretty good at writing that can help you with this. There are some online tools. I'm not sure what Indiana Wesleyan, off the top of my head, what kind of helps they have for you, but maybe they do. And so I would suggest that if you need help with writing, that you get help. Again, that's one of the reasons why I have these rough drafts, so I can provide feedback for you, so your final product is a really good product.